Hi, my name is Bess Scott, and I'm honored to be presenting to you today as part of the Midwest ASCD's affiliates conference to not just honor the National Day of Racial Healing, but to challenge each of us to take action to make our schools better for each and every student, family, educator, and employee. It is a moral imperative that we take this challenge. And I hope today that I can add to your knowledge to be able to do that. You see on the screen our objectives for the day. Take a look. Which ones resonate with you? In this short of time, we hope to be able to get you to know and understand, and to also commit to taking action on being a culturally proficient leader. Our agenda for today is culturally proficient leadership, the why, what, and how. We'll look at what it is to assess the leadership model in your school, in your district, and move us toward that challenge by making a commitment. First, I want to talk about this elephant in the room. What is this white woman of privilege who's been on a lifelong journey of inside out to be culturally proficient, to be actively anti-racist? What right do I have? The first time this Iowa girl talked to a person of color was when I started college in Chicago in the 70s. I taught in Omaha public schools during all the 80s when we were under court-ordered disseg. And I learned so much as a pre-K-12 educator and as a leader with a title in Lincoln Public Schools, that we've been fighting this fight, and we still are in the same place that we were when I started college in the 70s. We think we've grown, and then the reality becomes visible to us who are naive and who have privilege. So my current job is that of a university professor in an educational leadership program. And we have been pushing hard to become very concrete and action-oriented on culturally proficient leadership, because the time is now. I am so grateful and thankful for the many mentors, for Marilyn, for Monica, for all the people of color who have pushed me to grow, who have shown me how to think about my privilege and have called me on when I've activated my privilege for absolutely the wrong things. This inside out journey and my growth would not have been possible without my students and these strong voices in my life. Why are we doing this? Why do we have to have cultural proficient leaderships? Because it is the only right, moral, and ethical thing to do. This is on the Capitol steps of Lincoln, Nebraska. The African-American man that you see holding the "No Justice, No Peace" sign is the only African-American in our legislature, and he has been term limited out. We know this work is important, and it has to happen now. This summer, if you notice on the slide, from June 26th to July 6th, the Gallup Center for Black Voices took a survey from their 100,000 person sample size from all over the country about microaggressions and what people of color and especially Black adults experience. And as you look down that list of microaggressions, you know those happen every day in our schools. And it's not okay. And it happens to kids and it happens to adults. And what are we going to do? This is why we have to become very metacognitive, intentional, and then active with culturally proficient leadership. Look at the street of Lincoln, Nebraska. These are our students. These are our families. This is our community. This is your community. This is why the time is now to take action. Notice what this Gallup survey found. Think about your classroom, your school, your district, your community. What are your students and their families, your colleagues? What are you experiencing? In November, Jai Mehta from the Harvard Graduate School of Education wrote this piece that says, equity work, too much talk, too little action. And that's why we have to step up. That's why we're stuck in the same place. Read that quote aloud wherever you're watching this video. I can almost hear some of you shouting the last line. If we don't get moving, energy will dissipate and backlash will begin. This presentation is about the time is now. She deserves it. Everyone standing on the curb deserves it. We have to change our society now. And we are, as educators, the folks who can do that. We must, and we can. So let's think about another why. Let's think about your district and school data. And I think there's two places that schools look at normally for disproportionality. We look at who we hire, who we retain, and we look at student achievement and student behavior. But let's look a little more deeply. I'm not here to beat us up, but I believe deeply in what we do and that data can help inform us of what we need to do. So I want you to think about not just who do we hire and retain, but who has which jobs and what proportion? Which teachers that you hire, which schools are they placed in? Which classrooms are they in? Who leaves and who stays? In what proportion and which schools? We need to look deeper and we need to look at the why. So data's data. It means nothing if we don't analyze it to turn it into information that we are then able to take action on and then repeat that cycle continuously. Have we ever looked at what we do in human resources with our employment actions? Which teachers, educators, other employees who are getting reprimands, suspensions, terminations? What do those folks look like? And what's the why behind that data? so that we can then know how to support and grow our employees. And student data, the disproportionality about who can learn, perform, and behave at grade level or subject level proficiency and above and graduate. And how do we not just look at it and beat ourselves up? How do we change that? What actions are we taking? How do we look back at our staff composition and the placement and retention of our staff to help inform us about who's getting the best teachers? This is why we need to have culturally proficient leadership, because it's so much more than treating people well. We as educators create students' lives. We have to own the power of that and also the responsibility. So, what is culturally proficient leadership? And I want to make sure you understand that if you are not a leader with a title, that you are still a leader. And as a 26-year school administrator, what I know is it's the leaders in your schools without titles that have more power. And your circle of influence, you are a leader for them. So when I describe what a culturally proficient leader is, it's informed by that information for our leaders with titles. It also is for every single person that influences their circle in their school. So you are a leader. Your title gives you a specific responsibility. So what should leaders know, understand, and be able to do? Nationally in 2015, the latest standards for educational administration, those leaders with titles. But as you look at the 10 of those standards, are those any of those that are not for every single educator? And think of how you activate them. Notice number 3, equity and cultural responsiveness. That's the title of a standard for all leaders. And here's where I might argue with the folks that developed this model. It is strong, it is good. And notice that they group equity and cultural responsiveness with what I'd call leadership dispositions. That it has to do with your mission and vision and your ethics and professional norms and how you strive to establish equity and you are responsive to all cultures. And I would suggest that equity and cultural responsiveness encapsulates the whole model. It is what everything else is pushed through. So as you think about this, it's not one in a list of 10. It's the 9 of how you do them to reach equity and cultural responsiveness. So the third standard, I'm going to pause a minute so again, you can read and process this. What jumps to the top for me as I read this is that absolutely this is all about every student. And yes, students are at the center and the why of everything we do. And if we don't do the same thing for every adult in our school, whether they are educators, other employees, or the families or the community that come in, we will not be successful. So, another bias about these standards, this is also about the adults. Would you not say that effective leaders ensure that each adult is treated fairly, respectfully, and with an understanding of each adult's culture and context? Substitute the word adult for each of those. And you know that's what we absolutely need to do, because we also need to grow the learning and nurture the adults in our school so that they can do all these things for the kids in our schools. So here's the last part. And again, I'm going to tell you, as you look at this, it is about both adults and kids. Because we need to address, is part of the reason we have all that disproportionality for kids, is it because our adults are marginalized? Is it because we have deficit-based professional learning? Do we have low expectations associated with race, class, culture, language, gender, sexual orientation, disability? Think about both kids and adults as we think about equity and cultural responsiveness. I think the both and model of this might be what helps us move forward for action and commitment. The state of Maryland has taken this standard, and actually all 10 standards, and have developed their rubric. And as you look at this, you can see some very powerful pieces to inform leader practice. And remember, you don't have to be an administrator to do these things. You are a leader. You have influence and impact with every single person you interact with. Some of my thinking has been developed through the work of Terrell, Lindsay, Robbins, that have the cultural proficiency books, manuals, guides through Corwin Press. And I'm not here to be an advertiser for them, but as you see in the corner, there's a little widget and a wrench. These are tools that have helped me grow and help me with both the inside out and outside in work of systematically and systemically addressing how we become more culturally proficient as individuals and as schools. Another set of tools, 2018 copyright, culturally responsive school leadership, and a 2021 copyright, and pushes me and helps me think more systemically, is this book by DM and Welton of Anti-Racist Educational Leadership and Policy. Because not only do we need to do the inside out work, we have to do the outside in work. And we know schools are driven through policy, that they create both guides and barriers to our work. So, what is culturally proficient leadership? Here's a personal definition that I've come to. Number one, it is unselfish, it is servant leadership, it's Gandhi, it's Mother Teresa, it's we're doing everything for the good of others, not the glory of ourselves. We want every kid and adult to have life's abundant and success, fulfillment, happiness, joy. What we want for our own children, our nieces and nephews, our grandchildren, that's what we want for each and every student that walks into our school, each and every adult. And we are social justice activists. We're about democracy, diversity, equity. We are of the people and for the people. And we live it in our schools, and we empower our students, our families, and educators and employees to be of the people and for the people in a collective power to change kids' and families' lives. So, pretty idealistic stuff. So, how do we do it? We need a framework. And that framework has grown out of the work that I've done at Doane University, out of Crete, Nebraska, with its graduate campuses in Lincoln and Omaha, Nebraska, taken from P-Cell, taken from the works that you see that I showed you, the different books of. P-Cell is that professional standards for educational leaders. You know, we educators with our jargon and our acronyms. So this has been stolen from and organized through all of those different resources. Most importantly, you systematically and systemically address diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you have procedures, protocols, and you're at it constantly, systematically. Systemically, it goes from self to what your job is, to your classroom, to the office, to the school, to your curriculum, to your district office, to your MTSS. It's everywhere, all the way through your entire district. And what are we trying to do? Here are the pieces of it. And we'll look at each one of these quickly. Notice these work for students and adults, because you are leading everyone you interact with. So, how do we do it? How can we care more about other folks than ourselves? Think of that framework and think of each of those bullet points. So, culturally proficient leadership. How do we do that inside out work, both individually and as an institution? An institution, think of it as all the different ways that you become more than just you. So it could be your PLC, your grade level team, your subject level team or department, your school, your department at district office, your whole district. So when we look at self and we look at institutionally are all those pieces. It's also continuous. But what is it not? It's not the one-hit wonder speakers you come in who have come in, or the one person of color telling their story. It's not blaming and shaming employees. It's being honest about what your systematic and systemic examination magnifying glass reveals, and then taking action on it, learning, seeking out others that are different than you, reflecting, owning, and changing to continue to alter self and institutional bias, both implicit and explicit. Here are some tools that are helpful. Both are very current, and we've used these both as a college of education in our classes, and they've really started the conversation to do that inside work and start to do the outside in work of the institution. It helps us look at the cycle of socialization that in the 80s, Harrow helped us understand about what we bring from how we were raised, our homes, our backgrounds, our schooling. It helps us look, and we really want to think about how do we get the direction for change to go into actions? How do we make sure we get out of this to move forward? So, as we think about also that whole issue, as we're getting our identity and we're dealing with racism, in the racial healing book, talking about and juxtaposing the experience for people of color and for white people and how it's alike and different, and having this is a powerful conversation and dialogue as you're growing as an institution. So the second bullet is about honoring and embracing diversity and seeking folks that are different than you. And it's about relationships. It's about valuing differences. A colleague of mine, Monica, who helps me think and grow, talks about this is the work of one relationship at a time and one experience that is different than your experience. And as that white person of privilege, not trying to have folks of color assimilate into your culture, but to seek out those differences and value and make the relationship so you can understand. What is it not? It's not just celebrating the days or months that have cultural connections. It's not about bring your food days. And I'm going to say to you, if that's all you do, stop it. And I know that may anger some people to have you hear me say that, but we should not wait to Black History Month to celebrate the contribution that people of color, that African Americans, that Black people have contributed, or that Hispanic people have contributed, or you name the culture. It's not okay if that's our approach. That is shallow, that is surface. This is an everyday of seeking, honoring, and embracing. One way to stay in the seek, honor, and embrace is to really dive in and put into action Glenn Singleton's agreements. And notice number 2, it's not going to be comfortable. You've got to be able to go where you aren't comfortable. And you have to speak your truth and listen to other people's truth. And know that this is ongoing, continuous work that you're going to be doing. Stay engaged in it. Commit to seeking, embracing, honoring. Let's think about, how do you create that equitable learning environment? Once you create it, how do you get it? And look at what it is: safe, caring, healthy, culturally responsive. It's every student, teacher, leader, staff member, family. All of us crave being accepted, valued, trusted, respected, cared for, and encouraged. How do we do all those? That's a big order for every single person. We often think, and I'm going to rant and rave a minute, I hate the word access. I don't care if the door is open. I want to know, is the each and every person inside getting the support to succeed and be successful where they want to be? Have we pushed folks through the doors? Opening the doors, I've had too many people say to me, I open the door, and they use that ubiquitous they, just haven't taken the advantage. Baloney. We've got to push them through the door, and we need to create a door that is welcoming and inviting and embraces and seeks them, and then supports them to get them to grow, whoever the them and they is. Don't tell me somebody has access. Let's make it so they are there. They are inside the room, they are active, they are learning, they are getting what they need to be successful, each and every person. Terrell and Lindsay and Robbins have cultural proficiency framework that you start from the bottom to the top to be able to assess your school environment. It's a very concrete tool to help you understand what is, as you're doing that, looking at your school institutionally, and you're making sure you're not just about access. This tool really helps you go beyond that. It helps you identify your implicit and explicit biases, and then it gives you some tools to help strengthen and make your schools more culturally proficient. So, what is this responsive professional learning? And you'll find that idea in the standards for educational leaders. You also, from Learning Forward, the professional learning organization. But it's about quality, high quality professional learning that always is pushed through that lens of cultural proficiencies, of making sure that you're addressing, confronting, altering the institutional biases that can be in your student achievement in the learning environment and how we teach, that causes our students to be marginalized, that gets us in this deficit-based and low expectations. And so we have to really consciously say, when we're doing professional learning, that to make it responsive, absolutely, it is research informed, data informed about what we need, and it always examines who is not being successful and how will this data informed, research informed thing, strategy, concept that we're learning take away from, eliminate marginalization, deficit-based schooling, and low expectations. It is not about one size fits all from the outside in. We know that students need differentiated learning. So do we as adults. And we need to learn it when we need to learn it, just in time. And it's not dictated by the outside. It is data informed, research informed, and participant driven. What is it I need to learn to make sure no student in my classroom is marginalized, no student in my school is marginalized, has only to work on what they're missing. And well, we know they're not going to get it anyway. How do we get rid of that? And how we do professional learning in our schools. Learning Forward has these wonderful standards for professional learning that can help us get there. Strongly recommend, if you don't know their work, that you learn their work to help you on this journey of culturally proficient leadership. So, how do we ensure equity? That there's the highest quality teaching and supports. And part of it is that responsive professional learning to build that culture of high quality teaching, that I can always learn more, I can always get better. And it's also about making sure that all students have the best teachers, that this teacher that's best at a certain thing teaches the students who need their skills the most, who need their knowledge the most. And we know, unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't happen. There are many schools where the most skilled teachers have the call of who they teach. And if we have not developed in our best teachers the mission to reach every single child, then we get this seniority scheduling that parents get to request their kids, their teachers, and or on the high school basis, AP classes, classes with the least behavior issues, get the most senior and sometimes the most skilled teachers. We've got to stop that. It's not fair, it's not ethical, it's not right, and it's not ensuring equity, that every student gets what they need at the highest quality level. We need to eliminate fixed mindsets in our teachers and in our students and in our families. And we've got to get rid of the access that limits. We need to not only open doors, as I said previously, we have to make sure students are in there and give them the supports they need. Teachers need to be given the responsive professional learning so that they have individual efficacy, that they deeply believe they can make a difference in each and every student's learning, in each and every student's behavior. And then we can get collective efficacy that we know John Hattie tells us has the highest effect size for having a school with high achievement for each and every student. The books are endless. The information is endless. These are some of the highest impact for me professionally and teachers and students that I've worked with. So if you're unaware of the middle top row, John Saphir's high expectation teachings, it takes this fixed mindset concepts that we know and takes it to a much higher level about how we can cause that change for each and every. So, what about this? Again, how do we get that supportive school community? How do we build it? How do we sustain it? Think back to the very first bullet point about systemically and systematically addressing bias, both implicit and explicit. Look at the lists of who we're doing this for. Who are the marginalized groups? Who have you not done the inside out work for? It is hard to lead, to influence others, to get this system, the supportive school community for each and every student and adult, if we haven't done that work ourselves. Notice, are we responsive? Are we respectful? And are we constantly eliminating, becoming aware of, then altering our biases, both implicit and explicit? It's not about being culturally blind. It's not being culturally destructive. Think of how all of these bullet points fit together, that we honor and embrace diversity. Of course, we see people's color and culture, and it is a strong part of who we are as a school, in our classrooms, in our district. And again, we go back to the tool from Lindsay, Robbins, and Terrell of this conceptual framework to get a school to be culturally proficient, to get past those barriers. The quote we looked at the beginning of this, why we need culturally proficient leadership, talked about, we talk, and schools have been stuck in the first bullet point of the framework of, and I don't even believe, at least in my experience, that we've gotten very deeply into the systemic elimination of bias. We've done a lot of internal work that's, we're frozen there, and we got to get out of there. As you read Dr. Mehta's quote, of course, we've got to do the inside out work. But as he notes, we're heavy on talk and short on action. How do we up the action? And he gives us 3 suggestions. And so let's look at the last objective we have, which is, what are you going to commit to? How and what are you going to do to be a culturally proficient leader in your school, in your district? There's a wrong way to do it. It is not about power over, and there are many right ways. So I'm going to suggest a series of steps that you take. So, first of all, you have to have this relentless focus on this work. It has to be the filter through everything you do. And you start on that inside out journey, and you develop those skills and mindset to be an anti-racist, to take actions. As someone said to me, you know, if we heard somebody say that, you know, they would never be a child abuser of their own kids or students, but out in the public, they're not going to take an anti-child abuse, we would be appalled as educators. How can we not be appalled that people are unwilling to take a visible anti-racist dance, and act on it. We then need to do the same work for our classroom, for our school, for a district, for the system, to look at, identify, and address our implicit and explicit bias as a system. We need to look at those policies, procedures, and protocols in our schools, in our district office. What about in our human resources department? And what about student services? How we deal with students that are struggling with behavior and mental health, and families that are struggling. Have we again looked at the policies, procedures, and protocols that addresses the how we support folks without marginalizing them? We can do this work. Then think about what's the leadership model of your school, of your district, of your classroom? Do you have a model? How are diversity, equity, inclusion, and culturally proficiency included? Is it there? What exists? What's missing? Examine how you all think about leadership. And if you have a model and you have a belief system and values about leadership, how you evaluate, assess, appraise effective leadership align with the leadership model? Because what we know is what gets measured gets done. And if you do not concretely, intentionally address culturally proficient leadership, will it get done? So what this might suggest is you need to develop or revise your leadership model. And we would suggest that you collaboratively develop this model. Then think about what leadership professional learning exists for both leaders with a title and without a title. How are you going to develop it through the lens of culturally proficient leadership? And then how are you going to develop, grow, and retain culturally proficient leaders? How are people going to know that this is how we do our work in this school, in this district? After all those steps, what's your implementation plan? Who is going to do what by when? How do you turn this from just talk to action? Because talk doesn't change and create students' lives. Talk doesn't change the environment in which all adults work so that they can be joyful and successful. So, as you think about this plan and you make a commitment, I'd like to close with a story that Larry, a teacher where I was a middle school principal, he was, I would say, Native American. He said, Bess, no, I'm an Indian. And I'm going to give you this story because I think we're having a struggle with our school. And I think this will help you understand the struggle. So please humor me as you listen and allow me to read this. An Indian grandfather was talking with his grandson when the grandson asked about how he dealt with the anger, struggles, and uncertainties in life. I feel as if I have two wolves fighting in my heart. One wolf is the vengeful, angry, violent one. The other wolf is the loving, compassionate, and forgiving one. The grandson asked him, which wolf will win the fight in your heart? And the grandfather answered, the one I feed. So, as you think about culturally proficient leadership, what is your personal commitment? Ask yourself, what will I do by when? How are you going to take the time you've spent and all your learning today with the Midwest ASCD virtual conference and put it into action? Make your learning count. You create students' lives every day. So, thank you. And I want to thank folks from Doane University that have helped grow me with my thinking. And as always, I update slides. So the most current PDF can be found with some other resources in the file that I have a bit.ly for at the top of this slide. Also, the Midwest ASCD has said that we can do some explaining of the work we do. Part of the work I do, besides being a professor of educational leadership, is that I do consulting and work with school districts, with schools, with leadership, and I call my company Pause Please, because it's through reflection that we're going to learn, and then we grow and we can go out and serve the adults and kids we work with so that they have lives abundant in happiness, joy, and success. You see the list of areas that I specialize in. I'm also a National Training Associate in Adaptive Schools for Thinking Collaborative and an MBTI certified practitioner. Some of the work I'm most excited about is my current work with culturally proficient leadership and tools to identify as we look at the different implicit and explicit bias that's in classrooms and that is in our schools that we are unaware of, and some tools and strategies and to gather data to make implicit bias visible, and then to facilitate the processing of that data into information, and then develop commitments by the adults to change that behavior, those actions that they are not intentionally doing. So, thank you again for the time you've spent learning to change yourself so that more kids and more adults can learn more at higher levels every day. Thank you so much.